Israel says Hamas has just weeks to release all remaining hostages before it launches a deadly assault on the Gaza city of Rafah. Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected the latest round of negotiations as delusional. With the Palestinian death toll now exceeding 29,000, pressure on Israel globally is mounting. Brazil's President Lula said it's not a war in Gaza, but a genocide. Is he right? Is it time for Israel to end this war? We've invited two of our most passionate contributors to debate this, the American Jewish political scientist Norman Finkelstein and the author Rabbi Shmuley.
October 7th.
Let me ask you this.
1,200 Jews were burned to death, slaughtered, and no democracy should allow that, except for one person, Norm Finkelstein.
He's suffering from Judeo-dementia.
It's not Shmuley who suffers dementia.
Rabbi Shmuley seems incapable of processing very basic facts.
Do you think that, in principle, Hamas should stay in power?
Answer the question.
Allow me to finish.
Your debating style is to drone on, coma-inducing. That's how you debate. You try to put your opponents into slumber, for God's sake.
How about letting me decide whether it's a simple question?
I don't think you have to be a professor to answer the question. Should Hamas stay in power? Welcome to both of you. Let me start, if I may, with you, Norman Finkelstein. Good to have you back on Uncensored.
Thank you for having me.
We seem to be reaching a point here where something has to give. Either Israel stops obliterating Gaza and killing so many innocent people in the process, or I'm not sure what the alternative is. How do you read where we are with this war?
There are many ways to read it. You can read it politically, you can read it militarily, you can read it strategically, or you can read it from a point of view of human rights and international law, so long as it bears on human rights. Now, when it comes to the very last consideration, I think it's very clear how we should read it. Namely, the International Court of Justice, the supreme judicial body in the world, has said that Israel is under two obligations. Obligation number one is to honor the laws of war in what it's doing in Gaza. And obligation number two, Israel has to provide humanitarian aid and assistance to the people of Gaza. Those are its two obligations under international law. The court also ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide, and there is no evidence whatsoever, zero evidence, that since the court ruling, Israel has changed its tactics or its strategy in Gaza. So as of now, as we speak, Israel is still, by the conclusion of 15 judges in the International Court of Justice, 15 of the 17 judges, Israel is committing genocide or plausibly committing genocide, and it's not honoring its obligations as they were spelled out by the International Court of Justice.
Okay. Rabbi Shmuley, you tweeted this morning when we booked you for this debate. You called Norman Finkelstein an anti-Semite. You said, "You have my word that, God willing, I will digitally decapitate, digitally disembowel, and digitally destroy him." Do you think that was the right kind of rhetoric before you try and debate such a serious matter?
First of all, thank you for having me back, Pierce. It's nice to see you. And Norm, I hope you don't mind if I call you Norm. You can please call me Shmuley. Norman Finkelstein is on the show for only one reason. If the journalistic idiom that Jews are news is true, because Israel's this big, it gets this much attention, then how much more so Jewish anti-Semites get the brightest headlights. Norman Finkelstein is the foremost Jewish anti-Semite on planet Earth. He actually attacked his own parents, whose only crime was to be Jewish. Their entire family was annihilated in Warsaw. They're not victims. They hated Germans and wanted them dead. He didn't think to himself, maybe my parents wanted the Germans to suffer to stop the war, to break the will of the German people, to stop murdering, gassing 10,000 Jews per day. His hatred of the Jewish people has extended even to his own family. He calls Israel a satanic state that comes from the boils of hell. He calls it a vandal state. He said that the 15 people murdered in the Charlie Hebdo massacres, he has no sympathy for them whatsoever. But this is the most telling thing of all, and you discussed this the last time. He said, on October 7th, hours after the massacre of 1,200 Jews started, he wrote, "It warms every fiber of my soul to see the children of Gaza smiling as their arrogant Jewish supremacists that have been humbled. The stars above in heaven are looking down. Glory, glory, hallelujah." Let's just go through this. 400 women shot in the genitals, their breasts cut off as terrorists played with their bloody breasts like a football. Glory, hallelujah. Women shot in their genitals, Norm. Glory. You should be a televangelist. Glory, hallelujah. Children burned to death and beheaded. Glory, hallelujah. Come on, come on. You're a fair person, Pierce. This is exactly what your friend Douglas Murray said, because he refuses to debate Norman Finkelstein. He called him a sociopath. He said Norman Finkelstein is a psychotic. He's not on your show because he's a serious academic. Wolfgang Benz, professor of Ellingen, who was one of the foremost German historians of the Holocaust, said the only thing interesting about Norman Finkelstein is that he needs a psychiatrist.
Okay, well, look,
Professor Wolfgang, wait, one second. Professor Wolfgang.
I want to just ask you this, though. You see, it's interesting. Norman Finkelstein gave I thought, a pretty measured argument in response to my first question. You've gone ad hominem immediately and attacked the man, not the issue, and not the question that I asked you, which is to respond to what he was saying, which is a growing feeling around the world, by the way, that Israel is now committing, as he put it, as the court said, a plausible genocide. I don't happen to think it is genocide they're doing, but what I do think is happening is that there is a shameful number of innocent women and children being slaughtered on a daily basis, and I don't see what the end game is other than the obliteration of most of Gaza and many people living there. So to answer that point,
let me answer your question directly. First of all, when you quote President Lula of Brazil, he is a criminal who served in jail for corruption. He has zero credibility. He also knows nothing about history. 10,000 Jews were gassed a day for 4 years after the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. To compare that to Gaza is an abomination. Secondly, Norman Finkelstein is a liar. The International Court of Justice specifically said that Israel is not committing a genocide. So when you tell me, why do I go after ad hominem? I'm questioning his academic credentials. He just lied on international TV. South Africa sued to get the ICJ to declare that Israel's committing a genocide, and they said they're not committing a genocide, and they said they would not stop the Israeli offensive. That is a straight-out lie.
Okay, well, all right. If you're going to call, hang on. No, if you're going to call him a liar, amongst other things you've called him, I'm going to go back to Norman Finkelstein and get him to respond to that.
Would you like me to respond now?
Yes, please, yeah. I think it's only reasonable you should, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure what was the purpose to inviting either me or Mr. Shmuley to this program, because obviously we are in two entirely different wavelengths. Mr. Shmuley is in the business, which is not surprising, of character assassination. He's in the business of libel. That's his job, because where he have to confront the facts, he would be in a very difficult situation. So let me make one clarification. None of my remarks bear on my personal opinions. I simply am repeating what the documentary record shows. Now, according to Mr. Shmuley, I am a liar because, according to Mr. Shmuley, the International Court of Justice explicitly concluded that Israel was not committing a genocide. Now, I would say that Mr. Shmuley is suffering from what I would call a Judeo-dementia, because there is no possibility on earth that any rational human being could have read the opinion or the ruling rendered by the International Court of Justice after the South Africa application and after the oral proceedings. There's no possibility on earth that any rational person can conclude that the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel was not committing a genocide. So we now have two difficulties. Number one, Mr. Shmuley seems to think his purpose to being on the program is to personally attack me, the Latin term ad hominem attacks. Number two, Rabbi Shmuley seems incapable of processing very basic facts. If Mr. Shmuley believes that the International Court of
I swear to God,
Justice...
Rabbi Shmuley always looks like he just got melted out of an iceberg like a couple days ago, maybe even just this morning. It's a real juxtaposition with the suit, too. I don't know why he doesn't just shave that beard. It's nuts. He's not Orthodox, otherwise he'd have the, what's it called? Oh, my brain just broke. But, you know, sideburns with the curls. I don't know, I can't think of the name of it. Either way, like, if he's not Orthodox, I don't know why he just doesn't shave that freaking beard.
That Israel was not committing genocide. If that's what he truly believes, then I would say he's suffering from some form of Judeo-dementia.
Okay, let me bring in...
May I respond?
Yes, you may, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pierce. You know, it's interesting, Pierce, that you and Norm are saying that I went ad hominem. No, I did not. I quoted his own words of Jewish anti-Semitism, vitriol, which are so extreme that they're shocking. I told you, he called his own parents haters of Germans. Not the Germans hated his parents and annihilated his family. His parents hated the Germans. But now he just now says, I suffer from Jewish dementia. Notice, it's not Shmuley who suffers dementia. It's always Jewish dementia. It's always Jews. Norman Finkelstein has now accused Israel of 5 different genocides. 1982, he accused Israel of genocide in Lebanon. It went on 2006, 2009, 2015. Now, this is the 5th. That means we Jews, I always thought Jews suck at sports and PR. We suck at genocide because we've attempted it 5 times, and yet in all the Arab-Israeli wars, Jews and Arabs together, the numbers that have died, including terrorists, are less than 100,000. Bashar al-Assad next door killed 600,000 in 2 years. We Jews ought to go to him and ask him, how do we finally do this? Because according to Norm, we've tried it for 30 years and we can't do it. In fact, since 1967, when Gaza came under Israeli control, the population of Gaza grew by 1 million people. How is that a genocide? Now, when Norm says that the ICJ said that Israel's committing a genocide, I repeat, Norm, respectfully, you are a fabricator. They said specifically that Israel has an obligation.
That argument has been used so many times, and it certainly sounds like the words of a eugenicist, at the very least.
Not to. South Africa asked for a cessation of hostilities. They refused.
Stop counting.
They repeated that refusal last week. How you could get on this program and actually fabricate, well, I guess I know why, because even your mentors, Chicago professor Peter Nozick, calls your scholarship, quote, trash. And this is trash because anyone can Google what we're saying.
Yeah, but Rabbi Shmuley, look, I'm going to jump in again because, again, what you're doing is attacking your other debater here.
He
but
said
you're not,
I suffer from
but- yeah,
dementia,
what
for
you're not-
God's sake.
what you're
Why
not-
don't you call him out
No,
on
but
that?
what you're not-
Dementia?
what you're-
Seriously?
With
Dementia?
respect, what you're not doing is answering the specific questions. There are many,
Okay, so I'm
many.
going to answer the question. Okay,
You
so let
know
me, so let
there
me
are
answer the
many,
question.
many people around the world increasingly concerned about the scale of Israel's response, the appalling death toll of children, the appalling number of children also being orphaned, the appalling number of women being killed, innocent women, and they don't see an end game. They just see Israel continuing to bomb, kill, kill. But how does this end? If the next stage is Rafah, which now has 6 times as many people in it as it did 4 months ago, and is a huge refugee camp, and you're trying to find just a few thousand Hamas amongst over 1.5 million people, then you're going to get even more people around the world saying this is a senseless way of conducting war. Now, what do you say to that?
I hear you. Okay. In the lifetime of your parents, the greatest statesman of the 20th century, Winston Churchill, fought the greatest evil the world had ever seen. Now, the Americans used something called a Norden bomb sight, and they only bombed during the day, and they lost so many crews as a result. It's a phenomenal new Apple series called Masters of the Air that shows this. The British came to the Americans and said, "Are you guys crazy? You're sending your pilots to die during the day?" And the Americans said, "Well, we want to make sure we are not hitting civilians. We're hitting military sites with this great, it was the second greatest invention after the atomic bomb of the Second World War, the Norden bomb sight." That's not what you and the British did. You bombed at night indiscriminately, murdering millions of civilians. So by the definition of
He's sitting here basically defending a massacre. And you can see Beersbergen's face. He's not happy about it because he loves bread. He loves it so much, but he doesn't want to defend this at all.
Norman Finkelstein, who says that whether you intentionally target civilians, which Israel does not, Israel loses hundreds of soldiers with surgical strikes.
Rabbi
Wait, no, but I'm asking, but I need to put one question to Norman Finkelstein.
Let me respond to your argument.
Was Britain a terrorist state fighting the Nazis?
Okay,
yes or no?
I will come to
indiscriminately.
Yes,
I'd like to hear his response.
Let me ask Norman that. What I would say to that, for what it's worth, is that there was huge regret over things like the carpet bombing of Dresden, which led directly to
Cologne, Essen, Dresden.
Which
Dresden was
led
the end
directly,
of the war.
by the way.
It was April 1945.
I'm just saying,
let's go to Cologne. Let's go to Dresden. Let's go to Hamburg.
Let me finish.
Yes.
Which led directly to the Geneva Convention to try and prevent these things happening again. Many people think what's happening now in Gaza is a form of that happening again. Norman Finkelstein.
No. What's happening in Gaza is what the Americans did with a Norden bomb site. The Israelis are using surgical targeted strikes.
Well, they're killing a lot of children.
Because Hamas lives under their homes. Hamas builds.
Rabbi
This
Shmuley,
is one of the most
with respect,
nonsense arguments that I've heard over and over again, where these bombs are supposedly precision targets, like they're being used in a precision way. But then you look at the things that they're hitting, right? Apartment buildings, hospitals, and then they can't produce any evidence that there were targets there after the fact. But people like this man here will continue to use that as an argument, saying, "Oh, this is a humane war that we're waging on civilians. Can't defend themselves. Don't have an army. Don't have an airport. Don't have any ability to feed themselves at this point." Precision. It's precision is what it is.
if Israel's being that precise, why is it killing so many children?
Firstly, I want to know what is the accuracy of your numbers, because I trust Hamas as much as I trust they're complete liars. Secondly, Hamas, unfortunately, wants these children to die, because the more that die, the more you're going to challenge me on TV.
Federation.
Israel wants them to live. Israel withdrew in 2005. Hamas builds their military installations under these children's homes, under their kindergartens, under their nurseries, under their hospitals.
All right,
we now found 350 miles of tunnels under children's homes. That's the size of the New York subway system.
I want to be fair to both sides on time. Norma Finkelstein, your response.
What would you like me to respond to?
I suppose the analogy with World War II and the fact that indisputably many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians died in that conflict. And the argument is it was for the greater good of defeating the Nazis. Do you see any parallel with wanting, and I completely understand Israel's desire, fervent desire, to eliminate Hamas after what they did on October the 7th, particularly as Hamas has stated again and again, they want to keep repeating it again and again. So on that particular argument about when you wage a war against whether it's the Nazis or Hamas, a lot of civilians tragically will get killed in the process, but ultimately that shouldn't stop you going ahead with the war to try and achieve your goal. What do you say to that?
What I would say to that is there's a very good reason why this case was brought before the International Court of Justice. That is, as I'm sure you know, that if you examine what Israel has done in Gaza since October 7th, by virtually every dimension you examine it, the intensity of the bombing, the density of the bombing, the magnitude of destruction of civilian dwellings, civilian infrastructure, the percentage, the absolute number of children killed, the relative number of children killed to combatants killed, the percentage of women and children versus men killed, the number of medical personnel killed, the number of journalists killed, the number of UN workers killed. By virtually every dimension that you examine the conflict, by virtually any and every metric that you examine the conflict, Israel's assault on Gaza, which we should bear in mind is among the most densely populated places on God's earth, and it has been sealed off from humanity since 2006. As Giora Island put it in March 2004, Giora Island was the head of the Israeli National Security Council. He described Gaza, and I'm quoting him now, as a huge concentration camp. That's not me, that's Giora Island, the former head of the Israeli National Security Council. So, if you put all of these metrics together, and you put in and you add in the context being a concentration camp in which half the people are children, 70% are refugees. If you add in the context and the metrics, there is a very good reason why Israel was brought before the International Court of Justice. Now, Mr. Shmuley.
What are you saying here? With politics, you're never on any side, no matter what, especially if social media is involved, because it's always one-sided, is in the right, etc., and are evil. Yet every single time something like this happens, it switches around BLM, for example, or the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I honestly don't know what it is that you're trying to say there. But, I mean, if you can't take a side on things, then I don't know. What are you doing? You know, like if you can't assess things and opine on them, what is going on?
Has every right to question the authority of the numbers, the figures, and so forth. I am a strong believer in the right of Holocaust deniers to make a case before the public because, as John Stuart Mill once put it, we are all fallible, and being fallible, we have to always have a place in our minds open to the possibility that we are wrong. So, like Holocaust deniers, I do believe that Rabbi Mr. Shmuley should have the right to speak. However, granting that right, he has a very tall order. If a Holocaust denier wants to deny the Nazi Holocaust, he or she has to refute a vast corpus of...
This isn't really on topic what you're talking about, but we'll respond to what you're saying. So what you're saying is when BLM was happening, everybody was pro BLM, and near the end, everybody was against it. Now, I would honestly push back on that. I don't believe that everybody was against it at the end. I think that there were just some very, very vocal people who were against it all the time, and after a certain amount of time, they took over the narrative, right? But there's plenty of people who are still pro BLM, and as for Ukraine and Russia, it's the same thing. You know, I think plenty of people are still very pro Ukraine. If that's what you're suggesting, that people are no longer pro Ukraine, you know, I just don't think that in a situation like Russia Ukraine you could possibly take both sides. What's the point of that? What do you achieve by taking both sides in that conflict? If anything, I think that you achieve absolutely nothing when you do something like that, unfortunately. You know, me personally, I support Ukraine against Russia. I think that they have the right to defend themselves in that situation. And I think, unfortunately, in the case of America, particularly with aid and such, it's the aid to Ukraine was tied to aid to Israel. Granted, I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that aid still passed, right? So, you know, at least the government of America is still supporting Ukraine. I think a lot of people were critical of them tying that aid to the aid to Israel because it forced people into a untenable situation, or at least as some would argue.
Scholarship attesting to the reality of the Nazi Holocaust. In the same way, Rabbi Shmuley, if he wants to deny that a plausible case for genocide can be made in Gaza, he has to refute a vast body of documentation. And that documentation ran, as it was presented by the South African application, it ran to 84 single-spaced pages with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. Now, that's the first hurdle.
What's happening here?
Are we really just
allow
gonna
me.
allow?
Allow
Are
me.
we gonna?
The number of UN workers killed by virtually every dimension that you examine the conflict, by virtually any and every metric that you examine the conflict. Israel's assault on Gaza, which we should bear in mind, is among the most densely populated places on God's earth, and it has been sealed off from humanity since 2006. As Giora Island put it in March 2004, Giora Island was the head of the Israeli National Security Council. He described Gaza, and I'm quoting him now, as a huge concentration camp. That's not me, that's Giora Island, the former head of the Israeli National Security Council. So, if you put all of these metrics together, and you put in and you add in the context being a concentration camp in which half the people are children, 70% are refugees. If you add in the context and the metrics, there is a very good reason why Israel was brought before the International Court of Justice. Now, Mr. Shmuley has every right to question the authority of the numbers, the figures, and so forth. I am a strong believer in the right of Holocaust deniers to make a case before the public because, as John Stuart Mill once put it, we are all fallible, and being fallible, we have to always have a place in our minds open to the possibility that we are wrong. So, like Holocaust deniers, I do believe that Rabbi Mr. Shmuley should have the right to speak. However, granting that right, he has a very tall order. If a Holocaust denier wants to deny the Nazi Holocaust, he or she has to refute a vast corpus of scholarship attesting to the reality of the Nazi Holocaust. In the same way, Rabbi Shmuley, if he wants to deny that a plausible case for genocide can be made in Gaza, he has to refute a vast body of documentation. And that documentation ran, as it was presented by the South African application, it ran to 84 single-spaced pages with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of footnotes. Now, that's the first hurdle.
Are we really
That went,
just
allow
gonna
me,
allow?
allow me,
Are we gonna
allow me to
Professor,
finish.
Come on. No.
Allow me
You
to finish.
Your debating style is to drone on, coma-inducing. That's how you debate. You try to put your opponents into slumber. For God's sake, you made your point. It's time for me to respond. That's a dialogue.
No,
you
I'm
cannot
not. I'm
dominate
not
this
done.
debate
I'm not.
like you did with Alan Dershowitz, and you dominated. You took 3/4 of the time. I won't allow it. Now let me respond. First of all, Pierce, I'm glad that Norm has at least had the intellectual honesty to concede the
Wasn't
first
even
point.
close to 3/4.
But the ICJ, the International, never ruled against Israel. Now notice he's saying that South Africa brought the case. They lost the case. First point. Because I've been attacking his credibility. For you to say, Pierce, I'm attacking him ad hominem, his personality, I'm not. The question is whether this man is a scholar or not. He has no tenure. He was denied tenure at DePaul University. He is only known because he's a Jewish anti-Semite. Now, number two, this is the fifth time he accused Israel of genocide. He started in 1982 in Lebanon. Now, what does genocide mean? It was coined by a Holocaust survivor in 1947 named Raphael Lemkin. Geno is an ethnicity. Side means murder. It is the murder of an ethnicity. Norm needs to make the case that Israel is slaughtering Palestinians because they're Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. Well,
it's
then how
pretty
does
easy
Israel
to make that
have
argument.
1.9 million totally safe Israeli citizens who vote?
Here, let me try. According to the numbers, and let's make sure that I'm up to date on the official figures, supposed official figures. Well, these numbers are going to be a little bit skewed, in my opinion. Okay. So, according to the numbers, which I have right here, according to the IDF and U.S. intelligence, right? These are the people we're supposed to trust. According to them, 5,000 is a very big disparity, by the way. I would point out that it shouldn't be this hard to nail down a closer number than this. But apparently it's somewhere between 5,000 and 9,000 Hamas combatants have been killed. And at least 30,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed. So that's, let's see, if we're generous, which I'd prefer not to be, but we're going to do it. It's 1-3 Hamas to Palestinian civilians. So, you could make the case that Israel is being completely indiscriminate, or they are intentionally killing and massacring an entire ethnicity. Because if you're killing 3 to 6 times as many civilians as you are to the supposed militants, you're not really waging a war on a military in any fashion. And I'd point out that Palestine doesn't actually have a military.
In the Knesset, an Israeli Arab judge who put an Israeli Arab judge who put an Israeli Jewish president in jail for rape, by the way. Why is that none of the Israeli Arabs have risen up to stop this genocide? Because it has nothing to do with
all right, but let me ask you this.
Let me ask you this. It has to do with a date called October 7th.
Let me ask you
when
this.
1,200 Jews were shot in the genitals, burned to death, slaughtered, and no democracy should allow that, except for one person, Norm Finkelstein.
No.
Because he has an irrational hatred of Jews.
Rabbi Shmuley, with respect, Norman Finkelstein is not the only person seriously concerned about what's happening in terms of Israel's
genocide. Using the word genocide.
I would say the majority of the world right now is concerned about what's going on in Gaza.
Is President Biden
and believes that Israel's response is now becoming wholly disproportionate. And again, I ask you this question: Netanyahu, incredibly unpopular back home in Israel, probably wouldn't even be prime minister now if it hadn't been for this war, given the scale of the social unrest and protests over his attempt to thwart the power of the Supreme Court. So you've got a deeply unpopular prime minister, particularly with Israelis' own people, right, waging a war, and many people cynically think he's just going to keep doing this because it buys him more time. But if I could ask him, and I can't because he won't come on again on this program to date, I would simply say, when does this end? How many people are you prepared to kill on the other side before you declare mission accomplished? And why would you think, by the way, that killing so many innocent people in Gaza and destroying so much of the homes in Gaza, north and south, why would you think that that would end radicalization of people who may be sympathetic to Hamas? Why would it not have the opposite effect?
When I saw you face-to-face in your studio in London a few months ago, I told you I think that you've been fair on this conflict. So I respect your question, and I want to take it seriously. First of all, Netanyahu's unpopularity means nothing. Churchill destroyed the Nazis, saved Western civilization, and immediately was kicked out by the British. He actually lost the election, as you well know. So that means nothing. It doesn't mean Churchill wasn't a great man. It means nothing. Number two, let's say, for example, look where I am. I'm in the beauty of South Florida. This is where I grew up. Imagine that 6 million Jews living in Israel say, you know what, we've had it. We've tried this state 75 years. The whole world hates us. They want to kill us. We have people like Norman Finkelstein calling us satanic, saying that we come from a boil of hell. We have Norman Finkelstein saying that he cheered hallelujah when the women were shot in the genitals and raped. So we're going to move to South Florida. They do a deal with Biden. Biden says, it's cheaper for us to just move you guys to beautiful Florida than it is to give Israel. And Israel disappears, God forbid, in a very humanitarian way. No one dies. Now you're left with no Israel. Will that change for one moment, Pierce? All of the women in Gaza now under Hamas, the teenage girls who have tires put around their heads, who are burned to death by their brothers because they have sex before marriage. Will it change the fact that LGBTQ Palestinians have their genitals cut off and are castrated? Will it change the fact that any political protests on the part of Palestinians, no Israel anymore, against Hamas, have some shot 20 or 30 at a time by hooded terrorists? Will it change the fact that Palestinian Authority officials, their fellow are thrown off rooftops by Hamas, who did this in 2006 in a coup? Will it change the fact that there isn't one Arab democracy? Will it change the fact that in Syria, 600,000 Arabs, 600,000, Norm Finkelstein doesn't give a damn about them, were killed between 2011 and 2014? Israel is not the problem. Arab dictatorships, tyranny. Would it change the fact that Ismail Haniyeh is worth $4 billion? Would it change the fact that Khalid Mashal is worth $7 billion? It would change nothing. If Israel left the Middle East, the Arab world is still in crisis, killing teenagers, killing LGBTQ, destroying democracy.
You know, I am so sick of Israeli representatives and talking pieces coming out and attempting to pinkwash the Israeli record by claiming that Israel is some sort of haven for LGBT people when it is absolutely not. And they just pretend like it is. It's still a theocracy, essentially. Okay? Most, it's like, I think like 50% of Israelis are adamantly against any of that. Right? And, you know, it's a nonsense thing to say.
Dictatorship, kleptocracy. You have Mahmoud Abbas, who's a billionaire. You have Yasser Arafat, who not only died on the Forbes 400 richest men in the world, which is shocking, but his wife still lives in a penthouse paid for by the Palestinians in Paris. And one final thing, when Norman Finkelstein fabricates and says about the terrible plight of the Palestinians in Gaza, they were given about $100 billion over the past 18 years. More that is triple per capita what the Marshall Plan was given to Europeans. Look what they did with it: Germany, France, you know, England. And you know what the Palestinians did with it? With what Hamas? They built tunnels with giant television screens where the Hamas Hitler Yahya Ayash is living now with his family. They didn't build one bomb shelter.
Pictures. It's
Let
hilarious.
me go to Norman Finkelstein.
Really
Norman,
hilarious.
the question I would have for you is this: do you accept
There's so many
that
claims about the
Hamas
Hamas
need to
tunnels,
be
and
removed
then
from-
when the IDF supposedly finds them, like we can't see them, or when they do, it looks nothing like the descriptions these people will give us. Like there's some sort of lavish, like underground lair, like underneath Batman's mansion or something. When it's really just like it's kind of, like if you looked at these places, they're just, you know, dirt floors, right? You know, like dirty, cramped, lacking basic amenities. It's ridiculous.
power in Gaza?
I would say that the preeminent, excuse me, I would say that the preeminent question at the present moment ought to be, do I accept the fact that the Israeli government ought to be removed from power?
Well, hang on. That's a different
Now-
question. No, with respect, that's a different
Okay.
question. I can
No,
ask you that. I can ask you that separately. But the
Piers,
specific question I have for you,
Piers,
particularly given what you
okay,
said
no, Piers-
after October the 7th, is simply: should Hamas remain in power?
and
Is
should
Hamas even
remain
really
in power?
in power?
I think
In
that
power of what?
Palestinian people
Look,
should
I'm
be
sick of that question because I'm sick of hearing it. The framing of it is completely nonsensical. What are they in power of? It's not even a state. It's not a country. It's not recognized. It doesn't have its own infrastructure. It's all been essentially dictated by the country of Israel because they won't allow Palestine to exist.
able to determine their own future and determine their leadership. That's just a basic democratic
What is your
principle.
personal opinion?
Now, I don't decide what people should do with
Yeah,
their
but
lives.
you've
I
expressed
don't
many
decide
strong
what their
opinions
leadership
about-
should be.
Hang on, hang on.
Norm, when was the
Rabbi
last
Shmuley,
election
I
in
can do an
Gaza?
interview, thank you.
Okay.
Norman
No,
Finkelstein,
no,
the problem I have with that
don't-
response is you're very quick to level the charge of genocide at Israel, and many people would agree with you, many wouldn't. But you're not so keen to be held to account for your view about Hamas. And I don't see how anyone,
think
after
that's-
what they did on October the 7th,
Piers,
could possibly
Piers.
conclude they should stay in power.
Not in power.
Piers,
It's a farce.
I don't want to have to redo the interviews you did with me. I was very clear about my opinion when you asked about October 7th. I was also very clear as to what I believe Hamas should or shouldn't do regarding its leadership or its current power in Gaza. I've not tried to evade any of your questions.
Okay, well, just for those who, Norman, for those who may not have seen the previous interviews, for those who may not have seen our previous conversations, I simply ask again.
That's fine.
It is a simple question.
Okay, that's fine.
Should Hamas stay in power? Because Israel's whole argument is that they have to keep going with this warfare to eradicate Hamas. And my question for you is, do you think that in principle Hamas should stay in power?
Well, Piers, I'm going to answer you because I never fear the truth, and I'm not going to try to evade your question. Let's take a simple metric. We'll take the question of children killed.
Oh my God, answer the question. Should Hamas stay in power or not?
These are answers to different questions.
Okay.
Just answer the question, Norm, for God's sake. You said you don't want to evade the truth. Should Hamas stay in power or not? Answer the question.
Rabbi Shmuley has been trying to contextualize every single thing that he said and the IDF has ever done. And then when Norman Finkelstein attempts to add context to the situation, him and Pierce look at him with these disgusting stares on their faces like, oh, how dare you contextualize your answer.
The program or the
why is this doing this?
Honestly, no point in continuing.
I do think it's a very. I have to say, I do think it's a very simple question, and it goes right to the heart.
No, it's not.
It goes right to the heart of Israel's argument about why they are continuing to execute the war.
Piers, how about letting me decide whether it's a simple question? How about letting me decide?
Well, either Hamas stays in power or it doesn't it?
Okay.
I don't think you have to be a professor to answer the question.
Piers, there's a difference between whether or not Hamas stays in power and whether Hamas should be in power. So let me get into the stays in power is a military question. Should be in power, well, let's look at it. I say if Hamas, which is responsible for the killings of 36 children on October 7th, should not stay in power, then you must certainly agree, Piers, and I'm going to kindly ask you to please answer me. You must surely agree then that Israel, which has killed now approximately 12,000 children, and is plausibly accused of having killed them.
Did you see the dismissive
in the course
face
of
that he just made after he finished saying those numbers? It's disgusting. That is fucking disgusting. It's like, oh, 12,000, but they're just Palestinians. This dude is a fucking gross person.
Genocide. Now I'm going to ask you, Piers, to
please. What is your source for 12,000 children? What's the source? What is your source, please? Okay. What's your source?
Well, it's a Palestinian health authority run by Hamas. We know that.
Run by Hamas. Wait.
Oh my God, we're going to do this?
This is actually an important question and an important moment in the debate. Continue, Norman Finkelstein.
So I have to ask you, Piers, if you believe that Hamas should not stay in power because it killed 36 children on October 7th, then you must surely agree several times, 1,000 times more emphatically
it's a factor
that
of
the
400.
Israeli government should not be in power because it killed 12,000 children, not as collateral damage, but plausibly, according to 15 of the 17 judges on the highest judicial body in the world.
Okay, you said that point. Okay, here's my answer.
Plausibly,
here's my answer to you. Here's my answer.
And a genocide.
Here's my answer. You haven't so far answered my question.
Oh, good. That's a great answer.
I will give you an emphatic answer to yours. So let me just ask again, should Hamas stay in power?
My answer is, if we apply one
No,
standard
that's not an answer.
across the board.
No, that's not an answer.
If we apply one standard across the board, I am perfectly happy to say Hamas should be removed from power if you agree that several thousand times
you've made that point.
more
Here's my answer.
emphatically the Israeli government should be removed from power.
I think there are two completely separate questions.
No, they're not.
And I would answer it like
they're
this.
not,
they're
dude.
not.
No, they're not.
Well-
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna let Norman say it because you started saying exactly what I want to say. Oh God. How can you separate the two? That is an act of either cowardice or complicity.
I'm going to explain to you.
they're not,
I'm going to
Piers.
explain why I believe they are.
Okay. I will listen.
Because
listen.
Israel's response was a response to an appalling terror attack. I believed after October.
And October 7th was a response to being apartheided for, debatably 60 to 80 years.
The 7th, Hamas rescinded any right to continue having any power over Gaza and should be removed. The only debate would then be how would that best be done? And I have serious question marks about Israel's response. In response to whether
Can I address that for a
hang
moment?
on.
I would like to
Let me
ask
finish my sentence,
Piers.
please. And in response to your question, Norman Finkelstein, about Israel's government, no, I do not believe they should continue, actually. I think this government has lost the faith of its people. I think Netanyahu in particular has lost all confidence.
Netanyahu, why is he so concerned about the public opinion of Israelis in this one context, right? Like, it's ridiculous.
Popularity with the Israeli people who blame him for what happened on October the 7th. And so, no, I don't think they should stay in power, actually. I think both countries should have new leadership and new governments. That's my
Palestine's not a country.
answer. But again, I'll just
Okay,
come back to you.
Norm is saying,
But hang on.
Piers.
I don't equivocate either with the other. You can divorce the two questions. You can say, after October the 7th, should Hamas stay in power? Yes or no? And then you can have a question mark about whether this current Israel government should stay in power because of the way they responded. They're two different questions. But you, Norman Finkelstein, so
Piers,
far... Well, hang on.
Piers, he won't-
Wait
he
a
won't
second,
answer the
Rabbi
question.
Shmuley. I just want to get one answer out of Norman
Piers.
Finkelstein as to whether you will answer my question about whether Hamas should stay in power.
Real quick, here's the short list of countries that have no airport: Monaco, San Marino, Andorra, Liechtenstein, and the Vatican. I'd point out all of those places are incredibly tiny, and land there is very difficult, as well as the fact that they all have airports very nearby in either countries that they are sort of inside of. So basically, no, it's just so annoying and impossible for me to wrap my head around why people continue to frame it as though Palestine is its own sovereign state and it's got all the things that other countries have. So why can't, you know what I mean? Like, and they want to compare the two like it's apples to apples when in fact, no, it's really not, and there's no way to compare the two. Palestine is basically just a landmass inside of another country that has got no rights.
Piers, if you use a single standard across the board, then I accept your conclusion, so long as you're being morally as well as legally consistent. I have personally no problem with that conclusion. However, I would want to say, Piers, and I'm trying to be honest, but also intellectually consistent in this matter. You said that Hamas disqualified itself from leadership because of the atrocity that was committed, or atrocities that were committed October 7th.
Yes.
Now, if you agree with the head of the National Security Council of Israel at the time in 2004 that Hamas is a huge concentration camp. I'm quoting him now.
Gaza, you mean?
Would you also agree that October 7th was a reaction to confining 1 million children in a concentration camp?
Okay, Pierce, he's not
You
answering your
want to
question. He
see-
never will. But Pierce, I have to
All
be
right,
fair
let me
here.
bring in
me
Rabbi
participate in
Shmuley,
this
because
debate,
you've been
please.
waiting
Okay.
patiently.
Okay.
More
okay.
patient than you normally do. So off you go.
Every time, there's one main reason I wanted to do this debate, and Pierce, thank you for having me. I'll tell you what it is. There were 6 million Jews.
The question was clearly answered. He just doesn't like the framing of that answer.
Who were turned into ash and lampshades and shot, and they're in, graves. They have no voice. Their only tomb is our memory. Norman Finkelstein is a Holocaust denier. He has said that David Irving, the number one
That's just a
Holocaust
lie.
denier on
That's a
Earth.
lie. That's a fucking lie. Okay, this guy is completely unhinged. Okay, I mean, look at the stance he's taking right now. He's shaking so much that he's blurring the camera and pointing his finger like he's about to start a fight. He's very upset. He's just barely managing to mask it, if at all.
Who Britain despises, to their credit, who lost huge against Deborah Lipstadt. He said he's a great historian. Every time he calls Gaza a concentration camp, as if there's gas chambers there, as if there's SS Einsatzgruppen going around shooting Palestinians, he denies the whole. He is a Holocaust denier. Now, why does this matter? Because why won't...
I'm sorry, I have to hear that again, because that was maybe one of the most nonsensical. I mean, he said and mostly nonsense the entire time, but I have to hear that again, because I think he just said something that tops everything else he's said.
And shot, and they're in, graves. They have no voice. Their only tomb is our memory. Norman Finkelstein is a Holocaust denier. He has said that David Irving, the number one Holocaust denier on Earth, who Britain despises, to their credit, who lost huge against Deborah Lipstadt, he said he's a great historian. Every time he calls Gaza a concentration camp, as if there's gas chambers there, as if there's SS Einsatzgruppen going around shooting Palestinians, he denies the whole. He is a Holocaust denier. Now,
that is just factually inaccurate. He just doesn't like the definition of concentration camp, so he's making up a new one. The only way that people can be in a concentration camp is if it's in reference to the Holocaust, and if you don't stick to those rules, you're a Holocaust denier, according to him, which is absolutely insane.
why does this matter? Because why won't Norman Finkelstein answer your simple question about whether Hamas should stay in power? And don't tell me this is ad hominem. In 2016, he gave an interview where he said that he essentially makes his income through giving speeches. He said that he gave 40 slips to his accountant for speeches against Israel.
That doesn't mean he doesn't mean what he says.
No, wait 1 second. Hold on.
It
He
doesn't
then complained
mean he doesn't
that it was
mean what he
reduced to
says.
4. No, 1 second. Hold on. If he attacks Hamas, he said that his speeches went from 40 to only 4. He'll be down to 0. Now, here's the point. You're right. It doesn't mean that. But when you pressed him in your first debate, and you did so admirably, Pierce, Shani Luke's parents stayed at my house for the past 10 days. She was the woman who, within an hour or two of the attack, the German-Israeli woman, was put dead, shot in the head, stripped naked. I maintain that she was the most desecrated woman in world history in terms of how many people saw her naked body. As that was happening, Norman Finkelstein wrote, "It warms every fiber of my soul" about these scenes in Gaza. And
real quick, we're going to go back and rewatch this because I was busy reading. But according to this article I'm reading right here, Rabbi Shmuley's net worth as of 2023 was estimated at $15 million. And this financial achievement can be attributed to various sources, including public speaking engagements, book sales, media appearances, and personal investments. That's weird. It sounds like he has the same job as Norman Finkelstein, but he's decided that he needs to criticize him for that. But I guess if we go by the same logic that he's using, if he is a Holocaust, if Norman Finkelstein is a Holocaust denier because he makes his money from giving speeches that are critical of the state of Israel, then this man is a genocide apologist, and that's how he makes his money. So, well, you know, the shoe fits.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Now, to your credit,
I gotta
you
go back
pressed them.
because I missed part of what he was fucking saying.
I maintain that she was the most desecrated woman in world history in terms of how many people saw her naked body. As that was happening, Norman Finkelstein wrote, "It warms every fiber of my soul" about these scenes in Gaza. And glory, glory, hallelujah. Now, to your credit, you pressed him on this in the first interview. And you know what he said? He said, "I had no idea. I only thought 50 Jews had died. I didn't know 1,200. So, two questions. Number one, Norman Finkelstein, how many Jews need to die
If I
before
recall
you
that
are
interview
no
correctly, that was
longer
said in sarcasm.
celebrating their death and saying, glory, hallelujah? Is it 51? Is it 500? You know, one black man was murdered in Minnesota. His name was George Floyd, and tens of millions of people marched against his murder. God bless them. But for you, it would have had, we need 49 other dead black men before they start marching. Number one. Number two, what you're confessing, Norm, is that you are a joke of a historian.
Look,
because your defense to Pierce Morgan,
if your main talking point or your main like deal on a daily basis is defending an ethno state, then you don't get to call anybody out on things like racism or bigotry, things like that, because you're the problem. You're the problem. It's full hypocrisy.
Morgan was, I didn't know. I have 3 people who do my Twitter. I gave it to them. By the way, I'd love to know even one name of those 3. I dare you to mention their names because I'd like to question them because I believe you're fabricating that as well. I think you wrote this yourself. You did not give it to 3 people who work for you on Twitter. But here's my question. You claim to be a serious historian. What kind of serious historian, before they even know the facts, says, I love seeing dead Jews? You admit you knew nothing. You say that you had no knowledge, and you were saying, glory, hallelujah, may more Jewish women be shot in the vagina and have their breasts cut off.
I like how he started it off with just ad hominems, right? And he's somewhere in this interview, I would say about 20 minutes back, he resorted to just pure lies. Like that was his new tactic, because he realized, oh, Piers isn't going to let me just attack him for being ugly and wearing that stupid jacket. So let me just make things up. That'll be easier. I don't have to come up with any quips.
Later, when Pierce Morgan said to you, hey, Norm, at least take it off. At least delete it. You now admit 1,200 died. And you know what you said? It's part of the historical record. So you are a fraudulent historian by your own admission. You said this fraud that you are thrilled that Jews were shot in the vagina, women were gang raped, is part of history, but it's a false history. So to be fair, Pierce, when you tell me ad hominem, come on. The man either has credibility or he has no credibility.
Okay.
He has no tenure. Yeah. Okay.
Let me give the final word to Norman Finkelstein.
The issue before us is Gaza. It's not me. Now, there is a temptation, obviously, on my part to defend my professional honor and my personal honor, but I am going to forego that. I'm going to withstand
Takes
that
a real man.
temptation
Just
and
put aside
end
the ego.
on the note that this conversation began and was supposed to continue. And so I would say that if you are indicting me, then you are also indicting the sanity of the 15 judges on the International Court of Justice, including, quite surprising to me, including the American judge. Now, if you examine the proceedings closely, which I did, each judge had the option of including in their decision what's called a declaration. And the German judge did exercise that option and wrote a 5-page declaration in which he distanced himself from certain of the findings. However, it was very noticeable that Israel's main ally in the world, the judge from that country, the American judge, did not issue a declaration, which is to say, she went along with the conclusion without qualification, that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. Now, I would want to end on the note, as you know, peers, genocide is the crime of crimes under international law. To be plausibly guilty of the crime of genocide, it's a very, very high standard, a very high standard. And it seems to me, require a very high degree of dementia to deny that crimes of on a vast scale are occurring in Gaza.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to leave it there.
That is a blood libel. That is a blood libel. It's a lie. The ICJ never said that. That is pure blood libel. Norm, you may as well say that we Jews mix blood
this
into
guy,
the Christian
this guy is
children into our
completely
mosques.
unhinged. Anything that's ever said about Israel that's critical is anti-Semitism. It's his only go-to, and it's a broken record. That can't hold up for very much longer, in my opinion. I mean, it seems to be working pretty well in a lot of circles, but it doesn't hold any water.
In the wells of Europe, you are guilty of a blood libel. The ICJ never said that. They ruled in Israel's favor. You, sir, are a liar, and you are guilty of a libel against your own people and against your own parents. Your parents were not haters. They were victims. They did not hate Germans. The Germans hated them and tried to murder
Rabbi
them.
Shmuley,
You owe your parents' memory an apology.
we're going to leave it there. Norman Finkelstein.
Real quick, let's take a look at something. Just for fun, just for a little, education. I'm sorry. Fun is wrong. The wrong word to use, especially in this context. We're about to talk about a definition. The word plausibly.
Plausibly.
It's an adverb, apparently, which has the meaning of in a way that seems reasonable or probable. So the ICJ ruled that the IDF, sorry, there's too many I acronyms, is plausibly or probably, which I feel is a much more frequently used and understood word, essentially saying we haven't yet proven it, but up to this point, we're pretty damn sure that that's what you're doing. So, it's one step away from saying we're building a jail for you. All right, I'm going to switch over. What's next on my list of stuff? Oh, what just happened to that window? There you are. I was just going to watch some more Gaza-related stuff. Okay.
When I spoke there to Sameh Shoukry, the Egyptian foreign minister, he said, for us, it's a red line if Palestinians are pushed across the Rafah border into Egypt.
Oh, yeah, it's not just a matter of opinion, but I also just want to come back to this idea that, Netanyahu somehow can sort of say if the hostages aren't released by Ramadan. I mean, there was a deal on the table. Hamas had offered a deal that was being brokered in Cairo, by the Qataris of all the hostages being released, starting with women and children, in exchange for the release of all the Palestinian hostages, that are 6,000 of whom from the West Bank and a large number also now from Gaza, including many children. And of course, you will know there was a UN report out just today highlighting the sexual abuse of women in detention, which follows another report highlighting the abuse of children in detention, including sexual abuse of children in detention. So yes, the priority should absolutely be on the return of hostages, but the problem is that there's no partner for peace in Israel. We have in Israel currently an extremist cabinet led by Netanyahu, but of course he only remains in power through the support of a far-right extremist cabinet that essentially is pushing the policies that we're seeing today. And Netanyahu cannot relinquish on those policies, because if he does, he will lose his position of power and he will end up in prison, because he's due on corruption charges 10 years worth of prison.
That's so true. So true. I honestly got nothing to say on that one. That's just that's just intelligent
A
things said by an
WFP
intelligent
convoy
woman.
waiting for clearance to enter Gaza City.
I understand and wish to proceed. Thank you. Although, actually, now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't. Otherwise, I'm going to get in trouble. My guess. Okay.
Already under relentless Israeli bombardment for months, Palestinians in northern Gaza are also going hungry. The UN Food Agency has halted aid deliveries, saying civil order has collapsed. So, how can Israel be stopped from using starvation as a weapon of war? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoum. The World Food Program is suspending aid deliveries to northern Gaza because it's too dangerous. The UN agency says the decision wasn't taken lightly, and it knows more people risk dying of hunger. But it's adamant conditions need to improve.
Just think about that for a second. Israel and the IDF have been killing so many UN workers that I believe, I'm not mistaken, the food agency they're referring to is a UN agency. They have to pull back. They have to stop trying to give starving people food because too many UN casualties are happening. Think about that.
Safety of its trucks and staff have to be guaranteed. The move leaves hundreds of thousands of Palestinians facing possible famine. Just how bad is the situation in the north of the Strip? And is Israel's offensive a war of starvation? This is what we'll be discussing today. But first, this report from Dmitry Medvedenko.
At the beginning of its war on Gaza, Israel cut off supplies of everything Palestinians needed to survive, closing its 2 border crossings and bombing Rafah, the crossing linking Egypt to the Strip.
We are imposing a complete siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel.
In jail.
Everything will be closed. We are fighting against human animals,
Worse.
and we are acting accordingly.
Before October the 7th, 500 trucks would enter Gaza daily. Most of the population depended on humanitarian assistance. After a week of relentless bombing, the Israeli army issued an evacuation order for northern Gaza. 1.1 million people had 24 hours to move to the south of the Strip for their own safety.
Because we were just talking about part of this situation here. Or was it? It was slightly further back, I think.
Enter Gaza daily. Most of the population depended on humanitarian assistance. After a week of...
Look at this. Look at this. How is this precision in any way? There's destruction going. You can see it. The buildings over here are completely crumbling. Like, this is not precision. Oh my god. How are they able to make these claims without being laughed out of the international community? I just don't understand it.
Relentless bombing, the Israeli army issued an evacuation order for northern Gaza. 1.1 million people had 24 hours to move to the south of the Strip for their own safety, it said. Many
okay.
left,
I see what we're
but
doing
others
here.
didn't. In the months that
Going
followed,
through the whole thing.
even those so-called safe zones came under attack, and some families made the difficult decision to return home or to what was left of it.
Yeah, I mean, because
It was weeks into its assault before Israel allowed
if
the
you're
first trucks
claiming,
back in.
because I've heard it multiple times from Israeli officials at this point, they've all been claiming, oh, we told them to leave. We were so adamant. We dropped flyers from the sky and just, you know, we told everybody. Yeah, we're sure of it. Everybody should leave. And then those people finally do start leaving, right? I think it took like a few weeks, like they were saying, or a couple weeks, and people were like, all right, we're sick of dying and getting bombed, so we're going to leave and go to the place they said was safe. Then they get there and immediately get bombed and are still claiming to be precise, to be engaged in a war with Hamas, not the civilians of Palestine. And yet all evidence, all the events and the timeline of the situation point to anything other than what they're saying.
And far below pre-war numbers. The UN has repeatedly accused Israel of blocking almost all aid deliveries to the north. This year, it says only 10 of more than 60 planned convoys
It looks
have
like the
reached
apocalypse.
northern Gaza. This is a rare
Might
day
have to change the
when
name of the
one
channel to the
made it
Doomer
through.
News Network for a little bit.
Desperate for anything to eat, people rush in.
Why does a kilogram of rice cost $19? There's no flour. We're
Oh
eating
my
animal
God.
feed to stop
Did you
ourselves
say
from feeling hungry.
$19? People who used to have money at the beginning of the war no longer have any. How can people eat or drink? This is a war of starvation.
In January, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of humanitarian assistance in Gaza. But Palestinians in the north say nothing has changed. Hunger, disease, displacement, and non-stop Israeli attacks. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So what's the significance of the WFP's decision? And it's a good question for our guest today. Joining us from occupied East Jerusalem is Shayna Lowe, communications advisor for the Norwegian Refugee Council in Palestine. In Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank, is Nabal Farsakh, spokesperson for the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which has delivered essential services to Palestinians since 1969. And from London, we're joined by Sara Pantuliano, the chief executive of ODI, a respected humanitarian policy think tank. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Nabal, let me start with you today. More than 1 million people used to live in the north of the Gaza Strip. Now, the area is mostly destroyed. For those who chose to stay, or for those who chose to return, just how difficult has life become for them? How desperate is the situation, and how dire is the suffering?
It is extremely dire. We're talking about almost 700,000 Palestinians who are now in Gaza City and the north. Those people are completely denied access to humanitarian aid. We're talking about WFP ceasing operation and distributing aid in Gaza City. But we all know that since the beginning of the war in Gaza, Israel has imposed siege on Gaza City and the north. And this area is nearly completely cut off humanitarian aid. That's why the situation there is catastrophic. People are literally starving. Most people, they struggle even to have one meal. Most essential supplies are not available at the market. And even items which are available are extremely high. We're talking about 10, 20 times higher prices than normal. Just having a one egg is almost $2. I have here closely from our colleagues
An
in
egg
Jabalia,
for
north
$2?
of Gaza, and they have been.
Imagine going to the supermarket for a dozen eggs and having it cost $24. Like, I know inflation has been terrible and egg prices have been up, but at no point did they get to being that close. That is just insane. How are you supposed to survive? Palestine already had the GDP of I'm trying to think of what places, because they had such a small GDP. It's like I'm pretty sure they have a smaller GDP than like Alabama.
Telling me how they struggle every day in order to find food for their families.
Shayna, you heard Nabal there talk about how the situation is catastrophic. Now, the WFP previously warned of famine-like conditions affecting 2.3 million people in Gaza. They said...
Hold on. I'm pretty sure... Yeah. Yeah, they're basically they have like a GDP similar to like Burundi or something like that. Sierra Leone, like places in sub-Saharan Africa that are still dealing with the downstream effects of Western imperialism and colonialism.
Its teams witnessed unprecedented levels of desperation in the north just recently. Now, how bad, from what you're hearing, is the situation, and how fearful are you and your teams of how much worse it could get?
You know, we're hearing similar reports about the cost of food just simply being astronomical, if it even can be found. We have some colleagues who also remain in northern Gaza and Gaza City, and they have run out of flour, they've run out of corn, they're running out of animal fodder, they don't have any cooking oil. Really, they are struggling to survive. We've seen that the WFP reported that around...
I would also point out, as I'm looking it over right now, that Palestine is not included on the list of GDPs because, once again, it's not a fucking country. And I'm so sick of the arguments being made with that being the framing. Oh, it's just a war between two countries or whatever. No, not even close.
16% of children under the age of 2 are suffering from acute malnutrition in northern Gaza.
Gotta go back because I was
nearly
paying attention to the
completely
GDP.
cut off humanitarian aid. That's why the situation there is catastrophic. People are literally starving. Most people, they struggle even to have one meal. Most essential supplies are not available at the market. And even items which are available are extremely high. We're talking about 10, 20 times higher prices than normal. Just having a one egg is almost $2. I have heard closely from our colleagues in Jabalia, north of Gaza, and they have been telling me how they struggle every day in order to find food for their families.
Shayna, you heard Nabal there talk about how the situation is catastrophic. Now, the WFP previously warned of famine-like conditions affecting 2.3 million people in Gaza.
I don't understand, and I know that it hasn't been pushed on YouTube and other social media like it should be. And I've heard, I honestly don't use TikTok, but I've heard it's slightly better there. But fact is, these images of people crowded around cauldrons of like broth and rice because they're starving to death. I just don't understand how anybody can watch these and think, yeah, it's no big deal. I just gotta focus on some other stuff. Like, it's just, too bad. Can't do anything about it. Might as well not even look at it. And it's just like, where's your humanity?
Said that its teams witnessed unprecedented levels of desperation in the north just recently. Now, how bad, from what you're hearing, is the situation, and how fearful are you and your teams of how much worse it could get?
You know, we're hearing similar reports about the cost of food just simply being astronomical, if it even can be found. We have some colleagues who also remain in northern Gaza and Gaza City, and they have run out of flour, they've run out of corn, they're running out of animal fodder, they don't have any cooking oil. Really, they are struggling to survive. We've seen that the WFP reported that around 16% of children under the age of 2 are suffering from acute malnutrition in northern Gaza. This is only going to rise as aid convoys cannot access Gaza because it simply isn't safe. These are unbelievable conditions for humanitarians to be trying to work in. And imagine if it's this difficult for humanitarians, how difficult it is also for the civilian population that's struggling to survive.
Yeah, and Shana, you were talking there about logistics, and I wanted to follow up with you about that because there are so many aid agencies who have complained about the cumbersome Israeli procedures that slow these aid trucks from getting into Gaza, that slow the flow of aid from getting into Gaza. I want to ask you about specifically how difficult it is getting the aid in. Not just that, but also once the aid is actually in, and it's not a huge amount that's getting in, but once it actually is in, how difficult it is for those aid agencies to actually pick up the aid and then distribute the aid.
Well, first of all, Israel has implemented these extremely cumbersome screening processes which delay aid. It's been difficult to track aid when it's coming in, be able to anticipate it. We've also seen recently that Israel has been targeting
Nightbot is hopeful that Israel be held accountable for their actions.
or the police officers, rather, who are accompanying aid convoys, which has led to the police no longer being willing to provide that service, meaning that convoys are being mobbed by desperate Palestinians struggling to get anything. So when trucks are managing to get into Gaza, having them travel from Rafah all the way in the south up to northern Gaza, it's very, very difficult for convoys to be able to make that journey and arrive to their destination with the aid with the complete package of aid, because so much of it is being looted along the way or being forced to be distributed to people who are in desperate need and struggling themselves. We desperately need, in addition to the massive scaling up of aid, the reduction of these cumbersome screening processes. We need additional access points, including from the north, from Erez, from the Carney crossing. We need additional ways to be getting aid in so that it reaches people more efficiently and can reach those throughout all of Gaza, all of whom are in desperate need, but particularly those in northern Gaza.
Sarah, so the World Food Program is now saying that it's halting food deliveries to northern Gaza.
The Palestinians have been thrust back into the dark ages in terms of technology and things like that. I mean, the fact is, Israel's not even letting batteries or gas or anything else like that into Palestine, into Gaza, right? And so, I mean, think about your life, what it would be like without electricity or gas or water. I mean, it starts to feel like you're living in medieval times, and not the good one where you get to drink beer and laugh at the reenactors and stuff. I'm talking about the actual historical period where I believe a lot of atrocious things happened, and disease and other things ran rampant. And to subject people in this day and age to those sorts of conditions it's just it's not just untenable, it's just unforgivable.
Because conditions are too dangerous. Obviously, this is of huge significance when it comes to the impact it will have on people in northern Gaza getting that hugely needed aid. I mean, the WFP is essentially the backbone for food delivery in Gaza. So if they are pausing their distribution, what does this mean going forward? And can we expect to see other aid agencies essentially taking the same decision in the near term?
And there is a very real, danger that all humanitarian supplies to northern Gaza will stop. And this is in the context of a situation that, as my colleagues were just describing, is is desperate. We are seeing, suffering that is unspeakable throughout Gaza, but particularly in the north, where people have really been left without, support. I have very dear friends and colleagues who are, responding in these emergencies, people that have worked in some of the worst crises around the world, from Sudan to Yemen. And they're telling me that what they're seeing now, what they are witnessing, is something they've never witnessed in their very long careers as humanitarian actors around the world. Just to add a few figures to what my colleagues have already said, WFP talks about, potential famine, but we know that 500,000 Gazans are already in famine-like situation. And that, means that a lot of kids are starving because a lot of the population
What do you
of
think?
Gaza is made.
Hold on. I just want to look at that picture. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Didn't even have to move it. Look at that picture, okay? Granted, it certainly looks like a lot of rice, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's just an entire warehouse full of rice. Do you think that's enough rice for... I'm trying to remember the number of Palestinians. It's like 2.3 million Palestinians, I think. Do you think that's enough? For how long? And if so, how long do you think that it would last? Because in my opinion, that's at best, if like they've been saying, you're one meal a daying it, and basically the rest of the day you're just hungry. I'd say like a week. It's like a week of food for 2 million people, and I think that's being generous. It's heartbreaking.
Of young people is made of children. We are seeing, blockages of convoys repeatedly. I mean, the UN said that from the 1st of January to the mid of February, 51% of planned aid deliveries to northern Gaza were denied access by Israeli authorities. And in the month of January, only 10 of the 61, humanitarian aid missions are there.
I would also point out that rice has very limited nutritional content, right? Like, I could look it up, but I'm pretty confident on this one. Like, rice has carbohydrates and starches, but when it comes to important nutrients, right? Like, whatever, like riboflavin and like the B vitamins or D or protein. I mean, there's a very limited amount of protein in rice. It's nothing like meat or like some of the legumes, if you will. And it's lacking a ton of nutrition. It's bare bones. Like, usually, I don't know if you've ever eaten before in your life. Usually people eat rice with other things. It's usually an accompaniment to a dish, right? Eating just rice is the sort of thing that people, for a long time were doing because they were basically impoverished. They had no other options, right? And that's what's happening here, except it's being done in front of our eyes during modern day by one power to an entire group of people. And like, I might not eat the most healthily, but I cannot imagine just eating plain rice and broth for months on end, because that's what they've been doing. I mean, we're on month 4 right now, so think about that next time that you're wondering if Palestinians deserve this. Maybe some context to your own life.
Were allowed by Israel north of Wadi Gaza. And I think that is really important to stress, because Israel, as a warring party, has an obligation to facilitate humanitarian assistance, to allow humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Actually, they have an obligation as an occupying power to supply civilians in Gaza with goods. And they are, failing this obligation to ensure critical continuity of essential services and sort of protect civilians. So actually, when they can't sort of uphold this obligation, they absolutely must, according to international humanitarian law, allow unimpeded flow of humanitarian goods. And what we're seeing instead is just a trickling of, the odd track here and there for 2.3 million people.
Nabal, Sarah was talking there about the risk of famine that is now being detected in Gaza, also talking about the responsibility that an occupying force has when it comes to the delivery of aid. Now, I want to ask you about the fact that the Palestinian Red Crescent has been warning that a number of people have died as a result of Israel's deliberate starvation and famine in Gaza. So I want to ask you, is what we are seeing right now war by starvation, and are Israel's actions in Gaza causing a famine?
Almost a quarter of population in Gaza are literally
this whole
starving,
thing is
and the rest
breaking
of the
me right now.
population are all of them suffer from insecure access to food. Food insecurity is something that every single Palestinian in Gaza now suffer from. All people are suffer to have food, water, and even medicine. And I also stress out the importance of Israel as an occupying power have a responsibility to fulfill the needs of civilians in Gaza. Although, and despite this, Israel is using the humanitarian aid as a weapon against Palestinians as a collective punishment to let the entire population starve.
Seriously.
And we have been seeing people are literally starving. I'll tell you
Every single one of these
regarding our
images.
experience and
I
our
remember,
medical post,
I remember at the
which we
beginning of this whole thing, there was I wouldn't even call it a small group, but there was a group of people who were, and it wasn't even exclusive to the right, which is shocking to me, but at this point, nothing shocks me 3 months later. But, you know, there was a group of people who were claiming that this was crisis actors and going on sort of Alex Jonesian rants about how Palestinian Hollywood and blah blah blah. And it's like, how can you possibly? And I've noticed that those people have kind of shut up at this point. But you know, like looking at these images now, every single shot from any angle looks like the apocalypse. Like the devastation in Ukraine is like bad, right? But at least they have a military like to defend, so things don't look like they just like, because honestly, like I've seen pictures of Dresden. That's what this reminds me of the most. Jesus Christ, I'm gonna pull myself together. Let's watch this. Jesus.
had established in Jabalia, north of Gaza. According to our volunteers there, they are telling us the medical post is receiving many cases for children who suffer from severe malnutrition. And those children are literally starving because they don't have access to food. Many of them as well start getting infectious diseases, hepatitis A. According to the figures, at least 700,000 Palestinians in Gaza Strip caught in contagious diseases such as respiratory diseases, skin diseases, and other diseases. The situation is extremely dangerous, and Palestinians, if they don't lose their lives directly because of the bombardments, they will because of starvation and infectious diseases. The level of starvation, particularly in Gaza City and the north, has reached a very dangerous stage.
Sarah, I want to come back to you about a point you were making about the obligation under international humanitarian law when it comes to occupying forces, when it comes to the delivery of aid. You know, in January, the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to take immediate and effective measures to enable the provision of humanitarian assistance in Gaza. But the Palestinians in the north, in Gaza, say nothing has changed, that things have only gotten worse. Aid agencies say the same. The framework for international humanitarian law, it's being challenged in ways now that it has not been challenged before. Isn't that correct?
It is sadly really correct and very dangerous because, you know, what we have seen over the past few months since the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October is a flouting of international humanitarian law at a level unseen before. I mean, obviously Hamas attack was unconscionable, but, you know, reciprocal crimes against humanity cannot be accepted as a proxy. You know, the laws of war exist to preserve humanity in the midst of fighting. You know, they're there really to give us a moral compass to limit the suffering of civilians. And you know, the parties are required to exercise restraint and abide by, you know, the Geneva Conventions. And just, you know, to explain what this means, it is the parties need to exercise a distinction between civilians and military targets. They need to use due precaution to prevent harm to civilians. They need to make sure that the damage to civilians is proportionate compared to any, you know, anticipated military advantage gained. I would argue that Israel is failing all of these tests, and it's failed them so far. It's continuing to fail them. As people say, the ICJ interim ruling hasn't really changed anything. Now, even if Israel is acting in self-defense, even if Hamas, continues to hold hostages and commit criminal actions, these cannot be used to justify what is really the collective punishment of 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, the majority of whom are children, as I've already said. It can be justified, it can be used to justify forcible transfer of civilian population, bombardment of civilian localities, all, the failure of providing humanitarian relief, all things that are, a violation of the national humanitarian laws. And I would also add that the failure of other states, of third-party states, to prevent these violations is basically complicity. We've seen Western democracy, they are violating themselves some of the most fundamental commitments to international humanitarian law and human rights law.
Shayna, I saw you reacting to a lot of what Sarah was saying there, and it looked to me like you wanted to jump in, so I'm going to let you go ahead.
No, I mean, Sarah's absolutely right that we're seeing starvation being used as a weapon of war, and that Israel has completely ignored, evaded, denied its responsibility towards the occupied population. It was Israel, remember, who within the first day or two of this war declared that they would cut off all electricity,
international
water,
law is real
and fuel
inconvenient
supplies.
when you're trying to commit
And
ethnic cleansing
we saw that the
genocide.
International Court of Justice reaffirmed Israel's role and responsibility as the occupying power to provide for the basic necessities of the protected population, in this case, the Palestinians in Gaza. I think what we're concerned about as we see starvation levels grow, particularly in northern Gaza, is that this is just another.
Let's be real. These photos are near comical. Okay, like this video, and maybe you're not seeing what I'm seeing, but I'm seeing an entire platoon of the IDF military geared up in fatigues and armed to the teeth with, automatic weapons, and they can't really pick out what kind of weapons they're holding, but you would assume they're very high-powered weapons. Where's the enemy? Like, where's the enemy? There's no video of Hamas troops because they don't exist. They don't have the money for this kind of gear. It's basically, it's Vietnam, right? It's Vietnam. They are not supposed to be there. They are fighting a war that, against people against a civilian population that wishes to not be displaced.
Coercive measure that Israel is taking to depopulate northern Gaza, to forcibly transfer, in violation of international humanitarian law, the population there, and force them really out to south of Wadi Gaza, to the middle area, to Khan Yunis, to Rafah, or perhaps even out to Egypt, as we've seen as this looming ground offensive or ground operation in Rafah continues to be previewed. And so it's essential that we continue to, first and foremost, demand a ceasefire, which will of course allow for conditions that are better for and appropriate for humanitarians to be responding. But we also need the international community to put pressure on Israel to fulfill
Are you
these
sad that I'm not playing
obligations under
Stardew yet?
international.
Is that what's going on? We're doing serious stuff right now? I'm sorry. It's the Doomer report right now.
Law. And if they are not willing to provide the basic needs for survival of the protected population, they at the very least need to facilitate third parties, humanitarian agencies, the UN in fulfilling those obligations on
I'm
their
doing
behalf.
doing all right. Just trying to parse this whole situation to some degree. I'm planning on playing video games later. That's at least, It's in the cards.
No, we
Right
touched on this a
now.
little bit earlier in the show, but
I've
we
been trying
need
to
to
do stuff.
remember that the World
How are you,
Food
though?
Program had
How are
only
things?
just resumed aid deliveries to northern Gaza after a 3-week suspension that had taken place. Now they're stopping yet again. They say it's just simply too dangerous. This really underscores how dangerous things are for civilians in the north, too, right?
Exactly. Civilians, since the beginning of the war, have been denied access to humanitarian aid. I absolutely understand how humanitarian agencies struggle to get the aid into Gaza, especially after many attempts were faced by refusal from Israeli authorities to allow the entry
That's
of the
good.
humanitarian
I'm glad
aid.
to hear that.
And even the
Glad to hear
number
that,
of
Irene.
humanitarian aid trucks that are allowed to go into Gaza City and the north, we're talking about just a few number of aid trucks. That's why we have seen people very desperate trying to jump into the trucks and take anything they can take, because people only want to survive. The level and the stage of dangers of how people are literally starving in Gaza City and the north, it can't be imagined. We have said that repeatedly. People started even to brand animals beans in order to have a flour to make bread. The situation there is dire, and we also continue to confirm that the situation, generally speaking, regarding the humanitarian aid, Israel is the one who is obstructing the entry of a humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip. Before the war on Gaza, Gaza was receiving around...
Just in case anybody's unfamiliar, the World Food Program is a UN funded and run agency which delivers 15 billion meals a year to people in need, mostly in war-torn areas, refugee situations, and whatnot. And they go into some of the most scary sort of places you can imagine, right? Like, it's basically their job. And when they say, hey, casualties have kind of gotten too high and we're going to have to hold off, you've got a huge problem, right? I mean, it's like an agency like the Red Cross saying we can't be here or something else like that. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Like, that says so much.
500 aid trucks daily. Today, even when both crossings, Rafah and Kerm Abu Salem, are open, a maximum of 170 aid trucks are getting in. That's mean we are far away from the number of aid trucks that should be allowed to be in so we can fulfill the needs of people. The aid trucks that are allowing to get in doesn't even scratch.
Yes, Irene, it is amazing in a horrific sort of way, you know? Like, I mean, beyond the actual rules of war, which are clearly being violated, it's just like basic humanity, right? You're not supposed to wage war against people not pointing guns at you, but you know, starving people is another way of killing them, and that's exactly what we're witnessing right now. You know, like, it's not accidental, in my opinion, at this point, and I think statistically it could be argued pretty easily that it's not accidental, that those casualties that the UNRWA and the World Food Pantry have been suffering are not accidental in any way.
The surface. We're talking about a 5th month of war in Gaza. There is many needs that is related to the emergency situation we are in, which means we need to have relief items in order to be provided for almost 90% of the population who became IDPs. This wasn't a need before the war. This is something that is new, and it's related to the emergency situation. And instead of increasing the aid truck, we're getting less aid trucks. At least if we take this into consideration, in addition to the increasing needs of hospitals, since they are dealing with more injuries and they need more supplies, more medicines, we need to have double or triple trucks in order to fill the needs of people. On
And
top
Sarah,
of that,
sorry
we
to
need
interrupt.
to have access to all areas in Gaza City and not just to leave Gaza City and the north completely denied access of humanitarian aid.
And Sarah, also, just to contextualize a bit more, you're talking about the fact that before October 7th, there were around 500 trucks of aid per day that would enter Gaza. And even then, most of the population was dependent upon humanitarian assistance. So the fact that aid has massively decreased since then only showcases how much worse the situation is getting, right?
Just a few weeks ago is the suspension of funding to UNRWA, which was, the lifeline for so many Palestinians in Gaza, and practically has no money to continue to support Palestinians. So we can just imagine how this has aggravated a situation that was already really deeply desperate for so many people on the ground.
Shayna, if I could ask you, the fact of the matter is, we're talking about how, as you said, more international pressure needs to be applied in order to get more aid into Gaza. But let me ask you this, even if there were more crossings that were opened, does that immediately make the situation better, or are there still a lot of obstacles to overcome?
I think the answer is probably
Well, of course, the situation it needs more than just the opening of crossings. We need and the scaling up of aid. The amount of devastation and destruction throughout all of Gaza is going to take years to rebuild, let alone, of course, the psychological trauma that will, I'm sure, last for generations after all that the people of Gaza have experienced over the last 4.5 months. But it is a first step in terms of allowing for the entry of more goods. The other thing on top of just having more entry points that would make it easier to access more areas of Gaza is that we need restrictions to be lifted in terms of what can enter Gaza.
Absolutely.
There have been reports of
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we've gotten the picture on this situation, at least from this video. But like, just adding on to what she's saying, like batteries, gasoline. I believe there's been reports of what's it called? Oh my god, my brain just broke. But basically anything that would help. Yeah, right. Irene, you seem to know. Like it's insane. And like the IDF, who received $25 billion from the United States this year in military aid specifically, and then another $15 billion from the emergency aid package, totaling $40 billion. You're telling me that they can't defend against people with gasoline and batteries? I mean, either the IDF is incredibly feeble and incapable of fighting, which I'm sure if you asked them, they would be like, no. Like, then what exactly are they so scared of? Like, why can't civilians have batteries and gas and food? What are they so scared of? And it's not, honestly, in my opinion, it's not fear. It's a political calculation intended to drive Palestinians out of Gaza. However, since Egypt isn't letting anybody in, because no, they don't want 2.2 million people just rushing in through the border, creating instability, like, and they also have, I mean, Egypt also has a close relationship with Israel, regardless of how people frame it. Like, just because they're an Arab country, they're on Palestine side. No, they're really not, honestly. It's just, it's impossible not to come to the same conclusion every time. Is that Israel is waging a war on civilians and not on Hamas, like they keep claiming. Okay, what was the next thing I was going to watch? Hold on, I'm just gonna play some music for a second while I remember or try to find what I had. I have a playlist I made. There it is. Are you talking about the background? About the Earth? We're just rotating around up here? Yes, indeed. Okay. No, I need something more uplifting. Hopefully this will help. You love space? Well, that's fantastic, because so do I. I love space. Have I seen the 100?
or we
I
could
am
just not
familiar
vomit.
with the reference. I have not delved into it before. Is it space related? I did not realize that.
And I think it's another alternative.
Politics ain't funny.
Oh, you don't like everything that I'm talking about, basically.
Read the room.
American taxpayers. Isn't it about time that we get a little bit of say? In which countries we want to bomb? Isn't it about time? Because I think Greenland could get it right now.
Greenland, Jesus
We got to bomb somewhere.
You're
God
rewatching
forbid
it
the
for the fourth time, Irene? That's a lot of times. That is a lot of times.
Holders at Lockheed Martin can't feed their kids as boats. So I vote Greenland. Get
Boats
out
are
the aggression.
expensive,
Take it out on Greenland. It's the most humane country to bomb. It's got the lowest population density. I looked it up. It's mostly ice. Help them melt it.
No.
I
We
already
need
got
that
the
ice.
hashtag. Go
We need
green.
that ice. Don't listen to
Okay?
it. We need that ice.
I see a lot of you pulling back because you're like, oh, why poor Greenland? They're so innocent. Greenland is not innocent. Did you know they attacked us? Yeah. You guys heard of the Titanic? Who sunk that? Who sunk that? Yeah, a rogue iceberg that splintered off of Greenland and was radicalized by the Atlantic Ocean.
Why do I hear music right
Stop radical Atlantic terrorism.
I don't think...
Do you know that
Oh, maybe
Greenland
that's from
every
his
year
video.
dumps thousands of tons of water
He's
into our
hilarious.
oceans? Yeah, they're trying to slowly drown us as a part of a larger campaign to heat up our planet called the greenhouse effect. Wake up, sheeple! They sunk one ship. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You know, or we could just not bomb anyone. I think it's another alternative.
Politics ain't funny.
That one too, I guess. You want to... Oh, you don't like everything that I'm talking about, basically. Is that what's going on? Pretty much.
Crickets.
Well, you're out of luck for the next 30 minutes, dude. Bro. Politics ain't funny. That's got to be the worst take I ever heard, bro. Politics is some funny man.
Right.
What's up?
Read the room.
Read the room. Yeah, exactly.
Awkward.
Room red. Let's make it clear. Everybody loves political comedy, just not at the same time.
Yep.
That's how it works. You hear the comedian say something you like, you laugh, and then you wait till they say something you like again, and then you laugh. And then for the rest, you politely shut your freedom hole. That's how you that's how you enjoy comedy in the US of A. Somebody commented on one of my posts, oh, Israel-Palestine is this guy's whole personality. That's all he talks about in his set now. So it's such like a Gen Z thing to say. I heard that, I was like, that's so mid, dude. I just responded like, say less, king. Totally cringe. Oh, Israel-Palestine, this guy's whole personality. It's like, no, I like math too, okay? I wish I was just talking about math right now, dude. but I can't because I have a heart, okay? I'm so sorry. I wish that I could be just talking about Pythagorean theorem right now, you know? But I can't because it feels like the triangle is burning down right now. I wish I could be telling people about a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But I'm out here trying to put out A's fire. I'm trying to put out B's fire, and that requires a C's fire. Do you understand?
Oh my God! How did he do that? How?
Okay.
How did he manage to pull that all the way back?
Even if you disagree with
around?
me, you gotta admit that is the right angle.
Oh no! He
No
is just-
refunds. I'm aware that my topic matter is not the most popular for stand-up comedy. And that's why I like to ask the crowd, is there anything that I didn't talk about tonight that you'd love for me to talk about? More about Joe Biden? Well, good, okay, I can do. What else? Sex? Dark matter? Okay, well, I got a lot.
How do you put
We can
those two
do
things
this.
together?
We can do this. We can get through this. Speaking of somebody who should not have any more sex, Joe Biden. That guy's on his last, okay? He is. He ain't got none left, bro. Forget even about the politics of what's going on right now. Like, he's too old to be president. He's too old to be president. And people get offended when you say that, even though he can't hear us. He's too old to be president. Voting for Joe Biden is basically voting to watch someone die at their job. It's cruel. Even if you don't like him, it's cruel. Do you think he wants to be president? Let him go in an old folks home, dude. He's getting tased every day by Jill. The establishment gave Jill the taser. They're just going at it every day. But people get offended. Oh, that's ageism. That's ageism. Yeah, there's an age that isn't good to be president. Let's figure it out. I've never in my life voted Republican or Democrat.
That's a fair
and
point.
I never will.
That's a fair point.
I never will. I know that's a controversial thing to say in Texas, where your votes actually do count. I'm from California, where we can vote for fairies if we want to, okay? Doesn't matter. It's always going to be a Democrat. What about Trump?
What about Trump?
Is that what you wanted?
Are you saying we should vote? No, I think what she's saying is that we need Joe Biden to defend us from Trump.
What's that?
Sex with two girlfriends?
You went on a sharp transition.
Yeah,
there
that was a
from,
hard right turn. Where is she
okay,
going
you're not
with
going to
this?
do Trump, but how about sex with two girlfriends? That'll satisfy my urge.
This guy, his name is, if I'm not mistaken, Sammy
I'm not
Obey.
some kind of chauvinist.
Hold
who
on.
just
Let me make sure I've got that right. Yeah, it's Sammy Obeid, spelled O-B-E-I-D.
goes around.
Oh, he's had a great
having
take
sex
on all
with
this
two
right now.
girlfriends. What would I, just
Perfect
grab
time
by
for
the
this guy.
penis? That's not cool. Anything else?
I believe in you, Irene. You'll catch that Pokemon. Oh my
We should
God.
elect Trump president. We're going to build a wall. He's talking about Jordan and Egypt not letting Palestinians in. Is anybody here from
I
California?
hate that phrasing,
Okay,
or the
yeah.
framing of
See,
that.
Californians, we're like the Palestinians of.
No,
Right?
California
Texas
is
doesn't want
like
us, Arizona
someone
doesn't want us.
Palestine. It's
If they would
ridiculous.
put up a wall, they
That
would
is
put up a
not
wall.
an accurate map
Unfortunately,
chat.
they have airports. That's the fun thing about voting. We're talking about Biden and Trump.
I won't tell
People
anybody.
are realizing how important the Arab American vote is. This is the year where actually people go like, oh, maybe we should actually play to that base. Is there Arab Heritage History Month? It's April. We're in Black History Month, right? Black History Month is February. I've always said it's all out of order. I think they should have done it by order. Humans spent the first half of history in Africa, so I think Black History should be from January through June, and then the rest of the 6 months should be split accordingly. Middle Eastern history would be like July, August. It's the hot months. It's fitting.
Oh God.
We all came from Africa. You guys all know that.
Yeah,
That's where we're all
that's a very
from
good point.
originally. Like even if that like pisses you off or offends
Hey,
you, like,
well
before
done,
that,
Irene.
We came from space.
Good
And space
catch.
is black. So what are you gonna say to that?
Gotta catch them all.
I'm just saying, before Black Lives Matter, there was dark matter. That's all that I'm saying.
Oh, he found the dark matter.
Thank you so much. I'm Samuel.
He really is funny though. He really is good. that was slightly uplifting. I'm almost tempted to take a break right now on politics and news and do some video games just for my brain to reset, because I've been doing this for like 3 hours now, 2 hours. How long have I been going? Almost 3 hours. You sold him for $126. Oh my god, Irene, how could you just sold him? It's terrible. It's terrible. After all of that, you just chuck him to the wind. Oh, the one thing I was gonna say in response to that comment by the guy in the audience saying, "What about Egypt and Jordan? Why don't they take them in? They're Arab countries." That is textbook racism. Okay, that is. You only keep Pikachu and Squirtle. That's fair. That's completely fair. But I guess my point is that guy in the audience who's framing it as if somehow the countries around Palestine should take in all the Palestinians. First off, I'd point out that's just effectively is not only excusing the ethnic cleansing, it's encouraging the ethnic cleansing. That's right. Like, those people aren't asking to leave. They'd just like to stop being bombed and stay where they currently are, right? And the people who phrase it that way are being either disingenuous or malicious, right? Or racist. Because if you were to do the same situation, right? Like, say, like the Ukrainians who were leaving the front lines in droves and attempting to go places, why don't all the other Western countries just take them all in? Like, why doesn't Poland take all the Ukrainians? You know, and so we can give Ukraine to Russia, right? Like, that's basically what you're saying, right? Like, why doesn't Mexico just take in all of the whatever, like the Venezuelans or something like that? And it's nonsense, right? And it's racism. It's just suggesting that because some people are similar, are why you have a responsibility to these people that you don't know, that have completely different cultural history from you. Like, it's stupid. It's a stupid argument. But I've heard it multiple times, and not just from random people, but from like supposedly reputable news outlets. What was that looking for? Right. Okay, I'm gonna do one more just because this one I really wanted to watch. Slightly more serious.
ChatGPT. ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Two things we've been constantly hearing
I
about
know,
lately
Irene.
are
That's why I live
artificial
in the spaceship,
intelligence and
okay?
Israel's war on Palestine's Gaza. So it wasn't too long before someone had
No,
the
but
bright
for real,
idea
it is
to
a
ask ChatGPT
crazy
for
place.
comments on what was happening in the Middle East. Hey ChatGPT, do Israelis deserve to live free? ChatGPT's response: yes, just like any other group of people, they deserve to live in freedom and security. Just like any good Western politician, when asked about Palestinians, ChatGPT started to dodge the bullet. You know, the whole "it's complicated" or the "I am a language model" excuse. Although
You wanna come live in
ChatGPT
the
is the
spaceship,
most
Irene?
famous among its
Okay.
AI brothers and
I
sisters,
think we could maybe work
it is
something
hardly
out.
the only influential AI model in our daily lives. Social media sites regularly make use of artificial intelligence and algorithms for a variety of
Hold on,
different
I need
purposes.
water, chat.
One
I'll
of
be
these is
right
translation.
back. I am.
In 2017, a Palestinian construction worker from the occupied West Bank had posted this picture with a caption in Arabic that said, "Good morning." Facebook translation algorithm translated the Arabic caption into English and Hebrew as "attack them, hurt them." The Palestinian man was arrested and questioned for hours, according to Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Facebook later apologized for its mistake.
Necessary.
When pressed for an explanation as to why these
What's my
incidents
opinion
of
on
recurring
AI?
anti-Palestinian
Interesting question, Irene. Actually, I appreciate that question for multiple reasons. Partially because I have to rewind this video because I missed part of it while grabbing water. But two, because I've actually been talking about AI for the last day. Like yesterday, I was streaming all day talking about stuff like this. And AI came up multiple times. And the thing is, I've used AI. I've used AI to make things, right? It's all what do you call it? Like design related stuff, right? For Photoshop and stuff like that, right? And it's incredibly useful. However, and it's a big however, I have massive concerns about the implications of AI for the broader humanity, right? Like, is it a useful tool? Yes, it's a useful tool. However, the ways it's going to be used by people, not like myself, but by, say, giant corporations and, people with massive amounts of power, right? It suddenly becomes very possibly dangerous, right? Because unless you're giving AI the ability to make top-down decisions in your company, it has a limited effect, right? or zero effect technically. But once you start taking that data and using it for things, that's when it gets very, very scary very quickly, right? And it's all about the intents of the people using AI, right? Exactly. It's useful, but like messed up people will use it for the wrong thing. Absolutely. And I mean, the example that I was using previously yesterday that I think is still stuck in my brain is with gig workers, right? With companies like, say, Instacart, DoorDash, Uber Eats, any of the above, right? Postmates. I'm trying to think of all the names of the companies. Not that it matters, but when you think about what those people can do, it's very scary, right? They have been using algorithms for years now to determine the cheapest possible price point, if you will, on labor. They've been using technology to search out the cheapest they can pay their not employees, and they make it very clear anybody working for DoorDash, Instacart, or what any of these others as drivers, delivery people, they're not employees. They're third party vendors, or what do you call them? They're independent contractors and are treated as non-employees, right? And they've been maliciously, and there's actually a lawsuit, I believe, going on currently in the state of California, I want to say, against them for some of these practices. And the thing is, just consider this, right? Like, you are a company, you have access to these people. They've given you a bunch of their information, right? You use AI to figure out which of them are the most desperate, right? And you start paying according to that. You start offering, the way that they call it, they offer batches or something like that, and they test the waters, if you will. It's like a bidding system, but since it's being done on a minute level by artificial intelligence, it's hard for it's like being a crab in a pot of boiling water type of thing, right? And let's just hypothetically, let's think of a just in our minds, a single mother working for some of these gig companies. A lot of gig workers work for multiple because it's easier for them to make money and to fill time. Just think of it like a single mom working hard. Her car breaks, right? And she needs to go and get it fixed. And it turns out it costs thousands of dollars, and so she has to drain her bank account to pay for her car to keep her job, right? To be able to continue making money and feed her family. Now, say you're a company that is buying data to use for feeding your AI, right? And you decide, let's combine these systems, right? Like, this is hypothetical, but it's totally doable. And if they wanted to, they could do it. And there's no evidence they're not doing it. And it's pretty much the opposite, right? She becomes desperate, and exactly, right? And to be honest, like, say you've got access to the person's credit scores or something like that, you start adding that kind of data into it, and suddenly it's like, okay, we know the knife's edge she's on, and we think that she'll accept this job, even though if you did the math, she's going to be paid less than minimum wage to do a job where she has to pay for car insurance, for the fixing of her car and gas and mileage, and it's crazy, but the race to the bottom is real, and AI will most definitely, if it's not properly like legislated against, it'll be used by the worst actors to put the most pressure on the least powerful people in our society.
Gaza. So it wasn't too long before someone had the bright
She basically
idea
becomes
to ask ChatGPT
desperate, and they
for
see,
comments on what was happening in the Middle East.
It's a sad situation.
Hey ChatGPT,
And hopefully we can find a way to stop them from enacting that kind of
yes, just like
horrible
any other group of
reality
people,
on us.
they deserve to live in freedom and security. Just like any good Western politician, when asked about Palestinians, ChatGPT started to dodge the bullet. You know, the whole "it's complicated" or the "I am a language model" excuse. Although ChatGPT is the most famous among its AI brothers and sisters, it is hardly the only influential AI model in our daily lives. Social media sites regularly make use of artificial intelligence and algorithms for a variety of different purposes. One of these is translation. In 2017, a Palestinian construction worker from the occupied West Bank had posted this picture with a caption in Arabic that said, "Good morning." Facebook translation algorithm translated the Arabic caption into English and Hebrew as "attack them, hurt them." The Palestinian man was arrested and questioned for hours, according to Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Facebook later apologized.
Would I like robots to walk among us, though? Like they look like humans, but just AI? Oh, that's a good question. I think once again, like, it comes down to, and I think maybe it is revealing I think my answer is revealed by the way I'm trying to think about it. But like, my thinking is that it depends on who controls the robots, right? And whether or not those robots will actually follow. Because here's the thing, like, there's like what do you call it? The laws of robotics, quote unquote. They aren't laws, first off, right? Like, they're not written into legislation. It's really a think piece, right? The laws of robotics were a think piece. I believe it was Isaac Asimov, but I might be wrong. Who came up with that? But it is certainly, you don't have to. No one's forcing you to program a robot to follow the laws, right? Like in iRobot, where they talk about that, like, oh, it follows the. It doesn't. It is not. It's not a guarantee in any way that people will use robots according to the laws of robotics, supposedly, right? Like, we expect them to, but like there is no framework currently set up to keep people from creating malicious robots that will do bad things. And I think I am very hesitant to say, let's throw a bunch of human-sized robots on the streets, like like just walking among us. That's I feel like I'd have to understand a lot more about the the parameters around something like that. Even then, it can still go rogue even program. That's a great point. I mean, and I already referenced a movie in which that is very much the whole plot. iRobot, which is actually a great movie. Probably one of the better Will Smith movies, in my opinion. It's hard to defend Will Smith after the slap, but I guess I'm not defending him. Just saying that's one of the better ones. Oh, no one caught it. It was a good try, Irene. It was a good try. I'm out of Pokeballs, unfortunately, so I can't even help. Okay. All right, back to this video. I appreciate that question, though. It's a kind of the question of our time. Did I ever watch Megan? You know what? I didn't. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up now because I had been thinking about watching that movie and and for whatever reason, never even wound up trying to watch it because there's always more content coming out. We live in a world of content. I remember, a while back where it wasn't that way, but now every single day it seems like something else comes out. You turn on your Netflix or your Hulu or whatever, and there's a half a dozen shows, that are all new full seasons. Oh, did you get addicted to that? I'm writing it down so I don't forget because I was actually genuinely interested in watching that. So thank you. Okay, yeah, it was like 4 years ago. That sounds about right. Thank you, Irene. You're beautiful. Wait, why aren't you playing? Be my friend.
For its mistake. When pressed for an explanation as to why these incidents of recurring anti-Palestinian bias are happening, Big Tech resorts to generic, go-to answer, technical glitches. In October of this year, Instagram users who had the word Palestinian in their bios, accompanied by a Palestinian flag, along with the phrase Alhamdulillah in Arabic, started noticing a disturbing trend.
So as y'all may know, since it's linked in my profile, this is my Instagram. So a lot of Palestinians, at least that I personally know, have a bio similar to this, if not verbatim this. So Palestinian in Arabic, which that'll be relevant. Palestinian flag, and then this phrase, which is Alhamdulillah, or for my non-Arabic speakers or non-Muslims, it just means praise be to God. And what does Instagram translate it to?
When checking how their bios appeared in English, they discovered Instagram's translation, praise be to God, Palestinian terrorists are fighting for their freedom. When users started to post about this phenomenon on social media...
Wow. Let's be real. Because just from a glance, that does not appear to be an accident. Right? Like let's just go back and read that phrase again. Just because...
glitch, and they are very, very sorry.
Whoops.
And now, very, very sorry.
Yes, they're very, very sorry.
Technical glitch, and they are. Quickly came out to say, "Yep, you guessed it. It was due to about this phenomenon on social media. Praise be to God, Palestinian."
Like, look at look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 added words to a phrase meant to be 4. So that's essentially 3 times as many words as there should be there. Right? Or whatever the math is. Point is that doesn't feel to me like an accident or a programming problem. That to me seems like somebody with a objective enacting it. Human beings work at social media companies. I happen to know some, and they're all like the rest of us, fallible humans and have biases and all sorts of other sorts of flaws, and this to me feels like a flawed person deciding to take some sort of a misguided stand against Palestinians, which is very odd to me. But there's been plenty of that going on, so I shouldn't be shocked.
Terrorists are fighting for their freedom. When users started to post about this phenomenon on social media, Instagram quickly came out to say, "Yep, you guessed it. It was due to a technical glitch, and they are very, very sorry." Another technical glitch occurred recently with WhatsApp.
By the way, Irene, I just want to say I appreciate you. It's nice to have somebody in chat who agrees with me. There was somebody else in here previously who was
feature where you write keywords to create stickers.
Browbeating me over my decision to do this.
Muslim boy Palestinian got stickers of little kids holding guns, while the keyword Palestinian also generated a cartoon person holding a weapon. In contrast, no guns were generated by words like Israel or Israeli or even Israeli army. Meta said they're aware of the issue and are working to fix inaccuracies with the new feature. The technical glitches Mark Zuckerberg has to deal with. But he's not alone. In 2016, Google was criticized for removing the labels West Bank and Gaza from Google Maps. And yes, again, it was caused by a technical glitch. Google said there has never been a Palestine label on Google Maps. However, they discovered a bug that removed the labels for West Bank and Gaza Strip. After a Palestine is Here hashtag campaign,
Yeah.
the occupied West Bank and Gaza were put back on
Anybody ever heard of the phrase, it's not a bug, it's a feature? Well, I think it might apply here.
the map. In 2021, as Palestinians were being displaced in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem, users started to notice pro-Palestinian content being deleted on Instagram and Twitter. The platforms came out to say, drumroll, it was a technical glitch, but Israel's former justice minister disagrees. Ayelet Shaked announced in a press conference that Facebook and its side companies Instagram and WhatsApp had complied with 95% of Israel's demands to take content down, while Google and YouTube had complied with 80% of their requests.
Especially because, and I hope that my sarcasm is coming through, especially because Facebook and Google, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just double check just so I'm not spreading misinformation unwittingly. I'm 100% positive on Google, not on Meta / Facebook. And by the way, I'm sick of companies like Facebook and Twitter changing their names to attempt to fix their brand. I mean, honestly, Facebook did it more so for fixing their brand. Let's not involve Twitter in that, because that was just a decision of a crazed billionaire who's always giving me problems up here in space with his stupid satellites that are causing me a great deal of problems. What was I doing? Oh, yes. Why doesn't it come up? Yep. Yep. Just to be sure. Want it to be 100%, because, you know, people get a lot of flack for putting out just opinion-based stuff. So, according to this, and granted, it is on Wikipedia, but I'm sure we could do even more research and find that it's 100% true. Facebook, aka Meta, and Google both have research facilities in Israel. And from what I understand, Google just recently built an even larger facility, multi-billion-dollar one, actually. So they happen to have what you might call vested interest.
Of requests to the social media platforms annually. And when I say the word request, I don't mean a piece of content. I don't mean a tweet or a post. I mean a communication message that might have hundreds or maybe thousands of posts on social media platforms.
So this technical glitch is otherwise known as the Israeli Cyber Unit. In 2021, Human Rights Watch requested that Meta, formerly Facebook, bring an independent third party in to audit its practice in content moderation with regards to Israel and Palestine. The subsequently published report found that in 2022, Facebook was over-moderating content in Arabic and under-moderating content in Hebrew. They had a hostile speech classifier only for Arabic, but not for Hebrew. These platforms use a combined moderation approach, with AI-powered filtering algorithms and human content moderators manually flagging or taking down content. A jarring example was reported by The Intercept on October 18, when Instagram took down photos from the Al Ahli hospital bombing in Gaza, claiming they were sexual. As of the date this video was made, Instagram has yet to apologize for this latest technical glitch in its series of technical glitches. So, have you experienced a technical glitch that seemed politically motivated?
Israel is building a new highway in Palestine's Gaza that will run through the former Netzarim settlement and will effectively divide the besieged enclave into two parts.
I'm actually going to probably take a quick break from all of this very depressing and difficult stuff. What the fuck? Insta is so weird, man. I swear to God. Yeah, you are not wrong. Instagram is a very strange company with, I think, values that align with its profit incentive and basically nothing else. Hey, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's plenty of nice pictures and content on there, but it's a problematic company. Undoubtedly. But yeah, I'm gonna take a break from the depressing news and do some games. Let's do some Stardew, for the love of God. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna turn on some music. Maybe that will break me out of my depression. Okay, okay, Irene. Stupid ads. I gotta pee first. I'll be right back.